Head on down. Watch Brad, a member of Team Genesis, having one heck of a year as he won Grand Prix Omaha, he won SCG Baltimore, and he's looking to get another invitational win. He's 1-0. Ross Merriam, he's looking for that kind of crowning jewel achievement. He's got many open wins. That hasn't been tough for him, as he's going to lose a cathartic reunion, at least we believe. But he's looking for that invitational win, something he does not have on his resume just yet. You take a look at his opening hand, well, it's definitely going to be cathartic reunion that Brad does select. It's a Mountain of Dark Blast, a Conflagrate, an Arid Mesa, a Prized Amalgam, and an Archamoeba. And as Brad writes down the contents and eventually selects that cathartic reunion and falls down to 15, Craig, you said during the pregame show, and you've said it during our last couple of Modern Opens, you're a big fan of Dredge.
Yeah, I like Dredge. I don't think it's the best deck, especially considering how good a lot of the sideboard hate cards are against it. But people just aren't showing up with those cards.
You don't see a ton of Rest in Peace.
None.
We don't see a lot of Scavenging Ooze. We don't see a ton of Leyline of the Void.
Correct.
Really, we just kind of see Nile Spellbomb out of these kind of Grixis Death Shadows decks.
Yes.
And not a ton past that. I don't want to make it seem like Graveyard hate is non-existent.
Yeah.
But there's not a ton. I think you're right about that.
Correct. And I mean, we've seen times when the format is you're playing a Graveyard style deck or you're showing up with 4 Rest in Peace to beat those decks. And that's not the way the format is right now.
Looks like Merriam is just replacing a cracked sleeve there. I don't want to think any shenanigans are taking place between these two good friends. As Nelson has sacrificed a Scalding Tarn. And looks like he's going to fall down to 12.
Yeah, and we saw Ross on turn 1. Conflagrate for 0.
Yep. He just wants to get that. He just wants to get that card in the graveyard. Use the second mode, which is the flashback, of course.
Yep.
Dump the whole hand.
Potentially the whole hand, but at least some of the Dredge enablers.
Merriam is someone who's been playing Dredge a lot. He actually won an Open in Syracuse with this deck, so he's very, very familiar with the strategy. He has never deviated from this. As much as people have been enjoying Death Shadow, Ross has not changed and gone the Death Shadow route. He's always been very, very happy with Dredge. Here's a Thoughtseize from Nelson. The new card that Merriam picked up was a Golgari Thug.
That's a goodie.
And it looks like he's going to lose a Narcomoeba.
Can't take any of the others, right?
Yep, not really. All the other ones want to be in the graveyard. So Narcomoeba down, as Nelson's going to fall down to 10. Now here's a Death Shadow, maybe. Yeah, I'm going to use one of those words I like to use when someone plays slow. We don't call it slow. Call it methodical.
Deliberate.
Deliberate, yeah.
Yep.
Brad going to deliberately play that Death Shadow.
So what are you trying to say?
I'm not trying to say anything. I'm just saying that we use certain words for certain reasons. Brad's a little deliberate when he plays Death Shadow.
It was a very calculated play.
Yes, that's nice. I like that. That's a third one in the repertoire.
Yeah, we're just going to toss a lot of euphemisms at you guys today.
Absolutely. Very methodically cast his 1-mana 3/3.
It's interesting seeing Brad play the Death Shadow there because he's running it into the teeth of the Conflagrate. Now the question is, does he have something tricky, like a Street Wraith, to cycle here to keep it big?
Yeah, that's the question, right? And that's the card that Ross actually has to worry about here, is that Brad does cycle a Street Wraith in response to a Conflagrate, which looks like it would be for 4. That means that the Death Shadow would become a 5/5, and it would live. And that's not to say that Ross wasted the Conflagrate, because I feel like that's what Ross wants to do anyway.
Yes, but it's not the payoff.
Correct.
It's not the big win.
Ooh, thuggin' and buggin'. Okay. Gonna play a G-Thug and simply pass the turn back. Ross not gonna fall into Brad's trap. So now this is interesting, right? Because we don't know for sure if Brad has a Street Wraith. And these two are very good friends, so it's like a little game inside the game.
Yes.
Where Brad might not have a Street Wraith at all, but he knows Ross well enough to say, well, Ross is smart enough to know that I could have a Street Wraith here, so he won't Conflagrate it for 4 and try to kill it.
Yeah, and you have to know that your opponents are smart enough to identify all these different lines in order to make a, quote, next level play.
Yeah.
You know, you don't want to be playing on level 2 or level 3 when your opponent's only going to see the most straightforward aspects of the game.
But what makes this Golgari Thug play a nice hedge is that if Brad wants to attack, it's a snap block from Ross.
Oh, yeah.
And then the Dredge engine is online. So it is probably just the safest play that Ross can make. I wouldn't say it's the highest upside play, but it's definitely the safest play.
Sure.
Nelson going to fall a little bit lower here from a Bloodstained Mire. Going to go get himself another copy of Watery Grave. So he's going to fall down to 7.
Well, and the conflagrate has a lot of value in Ross's graveyard. You know, that puts a hard cap on how much Brad can do with his life total here.
Looks like, ooh, timely with a Liliana the Last Hope, which is going to clear out the Thug, going to allow Nelson to attack for quite a bit. And what that's also going to do is with the Golgari Thug trigger, and we'll take a look at that card very quickly for those unfamiliar, he's got to put a card back on top of his library. So he's able to put a Narcomoeba back on top. Stinkweed Imp, double Narcomoeba, and a land are what's going to be dredged here. Golgari Thug's going to go back to the hand. You can read that text there on the Human Warrior. When Golgari Thug dies, put target creature card from your graveyard on top of your library, which is a great place for Narcomoeba.
That's kind of where you want it, right?
So now Ross is going to use that Conflagrate to take care of Liliana the Last Hope, and now he's got some chump blockers for Death Shadow. More importantly, he's got dredge cards in the graveyard. So his engine is starting to get online slowly but surely.
Yeah, and I think with a couple recursive blockers and stuff like that, Ross can take a little bit of time. We see how these dredge decks can snowball. It looks like they have a slower starter, they're durdling around a little bit, and then all of a sudden it's just like, oh, they've got 6 creatures on the board, and the Death Shadow deck has dealt itself so much damage that they can just attack.
Well, here comes Death Shadow. Remember, 6/6 at the moment. Merriam not going to take any chances. He's going to block with a Narcomoeba. Nelson looks like he's considering moving a lot of cards from the graveyard. He will, in order to play a Gurmag Angler and another copy of Death Shadow. Now, all of a sudden, Merriam's in a whole lot of trouble.
Those are some big boys.
11 life, facing down 2 6/6s and a 5/5. And it's funny because I don't think Brad ever had that Street Wraith.
No, he did not. And just, but he did have the Liliana.
He did.
That's it, you know, his play was probably, all right, if he moves in on my Death Shadow here, I can just rebuy it with the Liliana later.
Dredge 4. Faithless Looting, Copperline Gorge, Life in the Loam, and a Bloodstained Mire are going to go to the graveyard here for Merriam. So what's difficult here for Ross is as he works to get this dredge engine online, he's going to play Golgari Thug and just simply pass the turn back. The problem right now, as I take a look at it, is he has no green mana for Life in the Loam.
Correct.
And so if he wants to dredge that card back and try to get that Conflagrate engine online, which he's not really going to have a lot of time to do, it's just going to be much too slow. And as it stands right now, he can't even do that.
Can't even do it. Even if he had the green source, I don't think he has the time to be dredging back Life from the Loam in this game.
And this is what kind of makes playing against the Death Shadow deck tough. And now Brad will cycle a Street Wraith. Ross is going to say, did he have that the whole time? Not too sure. But what makes this kind of interesting here is Brad's going to eventually sing here with all these creatures is, you know, Ross could easily handle one Death Shadow this game.
Yep.
That wouldn't have been an issue. It was the other creatures that showed up in mass the last turn that has made things very difficult for him.
Yeah, I think potentially even Death Shadow and one Gurmag Angler, he could take a hit here and there. He can find additional blockers, but 3 fatties is a lot.
Yeah. So Ross is going to block the 2 Death Shadow. Those are the largest creatures. He's going to end up taking 5. I believe he's going to fall down to 6 in the exchange, which he will. And now there will be a trigger from the Golgari Thug, which is going to put Narcomoeba back on top. Nelson's going to play a Watergrave tapped and simply pass the turn back. Merriam will do some dredging here in just a moment. And he will dredge Thug again.
Yeah, I think he feels like he has to be able to cast a card here.
There's Narcomoeba, recast Thug, Amalgam triggers, pass the turn back. I think he may have missed an Amalgam trigger early on in this game. Not entirely sure. I can't say that with 100% confidence.
I don't think he did. I don't think they were in the graveyard yet when the first Narcomoebas entered the battlefield.
Okay. So Nelson this turn, pretty simple. He can get him to 1.
Yes.
We know he can do that. However, if he attacks with everything and puts him down to 1, they got 2 Surprise Amalgam that are going to come across the finish line here for old Ross. So that's why you see, what were we going to use, deliberate?
Yeah, a pause in the game here.
Nelson, all kidding aside, actually does have a lot to think about this turn because that Gurmag Angler might actually be staying home this turn.
Yeah, I mean, his easy play is just draw a removal spell, kill one of those guys, and come barreling across for the easy win.
Yep.
That obviously didn't happen. So now he's got to ensure that he doesn't die on the swing back.
Nelson flicking between 2 copies of Death Shadow. He's trying to figure out how many he wants to attack with. And the tough part here for Brad is if he gives Ross more time and more dredges, it might only get worse.
Well, and it'll definitely get worse. If Brad isn't able to advance his board, next turn Ross's board will look this exact same or better, guaranteed.
Yeah, I guess that's true, actually. Yeah, if there's no attack, it just looks like this plus potentially more.
Well, even with the attack, next turn it's this board plus more.
Yeah, because he's going to block each. Narcomoeba's going to go on top.
Yep.
Dredge Thug again. Yeah.
Yep.
So we're going to see a repeat, except for this time. Those amalgams will be returned. Ooh, another Narcomoeba is actually probably pretty big here for Merriam. And he's going to replay Thug. This is interesting. He can get a little risky with these amalgams.
Yeah, the question is, does he want to whittle away Brad's life a little bit, which it looks like he does want to do. He has the buffer in his life total to where, you know,
he can take a hit.
Yeah, if Gurmag Gangler sneaks through, he's not going to die this game.
Yep. Pretty smart attack here by Merriam, finding a good spot. You do have to wonder what's in Brad's hand, but at the same time, I think Ross has come to the opinion of, I can't beat a removal spell anyway.
Sure.
You know, if you pick up a Fatal Push or something, I'm probably just dead anyway, or something close to it.
Well, he wants to give Brad as little time as possible.
Absolutely. Snapcaster Mage is here. Nelson will draw a card. A removal spell will do it now. That is a Fatal Push. That'll take care of a Narcomoeba, and that is going to do it. So a timely 1-2 there from Brad Nelson's going to win him game number 1 over Ross Merriam. Grixis that Shadow up a game here over Dredge.
The old ambush Viper out of nowhere.
Yeah, old Snappy. Nothing to rebuy, but sometimes you just need a 2-1 for 2. We will take a look at the sideboards here, and we'll start with Ross Merriam, who's got 3 Leyline of the Void, 2 Nature's Claim, 2 Ancient Grudge, 2 Lightning Axe, 2 Collective Brutality, 2 Thoughtseize, a Gnaw to the Bone, and a Maelstrom Pulse.
And we've seen Ross piloting this deck over the last month or 2 months, so we've got a pretty good idea of what he's going to want to do here. I expect the Leyline of the Void to come in here. It's just so good against the Grixis decks. The Lightning Axe kills everything. You definitely want that. And we often see him bring the Maelstrom Pulse in just as a catch-all when he's not 100% sure what his opponent's going to bring to the table.
Super safe card to bring in.
Yeah.
Super safe. Now, that last game, we, of course, do want to mention yet again, he didn't have green mana that game, but that's not often the case.
That's not how it usually shakes out.
Yeah. Other side of things here for Brad Nelson, 3 Ceremonious Rejection, 2 Surgical Extraction, 2 Collective Brutality, 2 Kozilek's Return. Along with a Liliana the Last Hope of Terminate, a Stubborn Denial, and this is Staticaster, a Disdainful Stroke, and a Liliana the Veil.
This is a little bit interesting. Brad has changed his sideboard since the last time we've seen him piloting this deck. Excuse me. We used to see a bunch of Anger of Gods as a way to combat these decks. It's also good against the counter companies decks with creatures they would want to rebuy out of the graveyard. So I think the Kozilek's Return is kind of interesting. He's definitely losing a lot by playing that card, but it's only 1 red mana to cast, which is pivotal here. I don't expect it coming in this matchup. Definitely going to see Surgical Extraction. Not sure about some of these other cards. Stubborn Denial seems like it's going to be good in the early game when you just need to buy a turn or two to establish your board. And potentially, is it Staticaster to clean up 1 toughness creatures?
Staticaster good against Narcomoeba, good against Bloodghast, decent enough against Golgari Thug. So we'll see if Brad goes to those tools. But Ross looks like he's sideboarded. He's shuffling up. Brad's just about ready. So we'll give these two a couple of minutes here. And we are going to talk about SCG Game Night, the very popular promotion. We want to thank not only our store owners, but also we got to thank you awesome players at home for making this promotion everything that's been able to be over the past handful of years. For the month of July, which was that tomorrow? Does that start tomorrow? It's already July. You know that?
That's crazy.
We're halfway through the year.
I didn't want to know that.
Yeah, we're halfway home through the year. We got Goose Saint Trapped. You've seen that one. For August, Puggernaut. You've seen that one.
A gem.
And drum roll, please.
Oh, we got a new one?
For the month of September, it's the debut of Smell Snare.
It's a skunk.
It is a skunk.
I get it. It's a stinky, stinky skunk.
Go .starcitygames.com/game night for more information. Welcome little Smell Snare to the party. of our wonderful creature collection. You can get that one in September. We'll also have, sleeves and playmats and player bundles of that in September as well.
It stinks.
It does. It does stink. Brad Nelson, a player we're going to learn a little bit more about right now. Your inaugural Players Champion back in 2014. This is a 31-year-old from Roanoke, Virginia. He's got 10 open top 8s, 3 open wins, 3 invitational top 8s, and 1 invitational win does FF Freak on Magic Online. He's an avid StarCraft 2 fan, one of the best games to watch ever, he says. Was a very good golfer back in the day. Is one heck of a Magic player now with a win at Grand Prix Omaha, where he did not lose a match. So that's a thing that happened. And he, of course, did win SCG Baltimore with Death Shadow, beat Ben Friedman in one heck of a finals. And a member of Team Genesis as well is Brad Nelson, the very accomplished mage who you, of course, see writing on the premium side of Star City Games, making those versus videos and being an all-around entertaining but very intelligent and always kind of just feels like one step ahead when he's playing Magic.
Yes.
Always feels he's one step ahead. And so what's going to be very curious to me, Grixis Death Shadow, we've seen Brad do this before. This is kind of old school for Brad. What standard deck is he going to play?
I'm also super interested in that.
That's what I want to know. Arguably the best standard player in the world in this very unique standard format. He basically never misses with standard. And the deck he gave me for the PTQ in Cleveland last week, and even though I didn't make it very far in the PTQ with his Team Energy deck, it looked awesome. It really did look awesome.
Felt dialed in.
Yeah, it just felt like and he was able to tell me how to sideboard and everything with it. So he gave me the full game plan. Brad's such a good man. I showed up to the site a little late. I was a little late Sunday morning. A little late. It rolled in. PTQ started at 9. I rolled in about 8:56.
Okay.
And he was in day 2 of the Team Grand Prix, and they were announcing pairings. And Brad had full 75 sleeved, deck list written out, and he was ready to tell me how to sideboard.
That is unbelievable.
Good man. I would have never done that.
No.
No. So just all around VG man. I appreciate that. I very much appreciate that, Brad. I was going to make sure I gave him some props for that because I was running it. I was like, I haven't filled out a deck list yet, and this is embarrassing, and I don't even know any of the cards in my deck.
And the big fear is that you need to run around to scrape up the last 2 or 3 cards for the deck.
I had all 75. Sleeved in his Team Genesis sleeves by Dragon Shield, and had the whole deck list written out, and what a guy. What a guy, I say. I very much appreciate it.
You're just really leveraging your friendship to the maximum.
I lost so fast in that PTQ. He did all that work for nothing. Ross is going to start things off with a Leyline of the Void, a card you had a feeling was going to come in.
Yep.
Very good against Grixis because of Gurmag Angler, Tassiger, the Golden Fang, and of course Snapcaster Mage. And now he's got an Insolent Neonate as well. So he's going after Brad's Graveyard, making it so that really his only good threats are Death Shadow.
Yeah, and one of the great parts about the Leyline out of the Dredge deck is that the opportunity cost is so low to playing this card. If it's in your opening hand, it's super impactful, and later in the game, you're not even drawing cards, so you're not going to draw one and just have this clunky card.
Happy to throw away to a Faithless Looting or a Cathartic Reunion, Conflagrate, so on and so forth. The opportunity cost, as you mentioned, very, very low. That's very appealing about it. Here comes Insolent Neonate. Ross has not sacrificed that yet or has done any dredging yet. That's worth noting. As we're going to head back over to Nelson. He started things off with a Serum Visions. And now he'll draw a card, picked up a copy of Bloodstained Mire. He's going to fall down to 15 now with the cycling of a Street Wraith, and he's picked up a copy of Thoughtseize. Let's make it 14, probably 12.
It's just every time, it's still just funny to me.
I could cast Death Shadow matches for the next handful of years.
Yeah.
And it's just still going to be awesome.
It's so entertaining. Just, hey, can I just start the game at 10 life?
Yeah.
Can I do that?
Yep.
Please? No, you cannot do that. That would be too unfair.
Yeah, just keep going. Keep going lower. Jerry brought himself to 3 willingly in round 1 if he missed it. Here's a Thoughtseize. Brad's going to bring himself down to 10, like Craig mentioned. A Conflagrate, and it looks like it just lands here for Ross. Well, Neonate's only got to hit 10 more times. It's easy.
Brad's on the clock.
Yeah. And actually, Conflagrate's in the graveyard, so even shorter clock.
Yep.
There. Even shorter clock.
Get to draw a card every turn.
You sure do. Best part of Magic. Let's see what Brad's got up his sleeve here. Anything else to do this turn? Now remember, those cards that are over there, those are cards that are exiled. And now here's Death Shadow. Merriam is going to sacrifice a wooded foothills.
And I think what we talked about last game, that didn't happen, the conflagrate for the Death Shadow, might happen this game. And this time, Brad has something to deal himself 2 more points of damage.
He has surgical extraction.
Surgical extraction.
So what's interesting about the surgical, right, is we might see Brad use it in the draw step.
Yep.
We might see him save it. Not entirely sure. How does he want to use it? Ross is going to draw. I believe he, oh boy. He picked up a copy of Life from the Loam, which is going to lean him towards wanting to do more things with Conflagrate.
Yep.
Which only makes sense.
It's a big, juicy meatball out there.
Yeah.
You know, and he just wants to get at it with his
Take
fork and knife.
Huge bite. Huge bite. Merriam, it's such an interesting situation.
Ross, that's not a good meatball, man.
Nah, they're all good.
Stay away from that meatball.
They're all good. There are no bad meatballs. Ross might be thinking about a lot going through his mind right now. So he's got a fetch land in hand. He can say, I'll sack a fetch, loam those 2 back. He could also just say attack with Insolent Neonate and then activate the Neonate to discard Life from the Loam just to get a Dredge 3 if he wants to and kind of get something going that way. But it looks like he's going to start by sacrificing a Bloodstained Mire.
Yeah, we saw him be very careful the first game, so you know, I wouldn't be at all shocked if he makes just a very sagacious play here and avoids disaster.
Going to get a Blood Crypt. Now he's going to loam. Going to get these 2 lands back. And now I'm curious to see what he wants to do with the Neonate. And it looks like Neonate's going to be on blocking duty, perhaps. Doesn't want to make that Death Shadow any more upset.
Doesn't want to make it bigger, and I think the longer the game goes, the more Ross is favored.
Okay.
You know, he already has that ley line on the board, so it's not like Brad's long game is that powerful. Brad's going to accumulate more and more cards that just don't do a whole lot.
Nelson will draw. Didn't get a great look at it, but he's got a lot of cards in hand. He's got a lot of cards in hand. Excuse me. You have to imagine some number of them are dead because of the ley line. But he's found his go-to threat, the namesake of the deck, here in Death Shadow. He's going to see if he can get some work done with that.
A lot of decisions here. You know, Brad wants to cut off that Life from the Loam. He also wants to cut off those Conflagrates. Those are a big problem as this game goes longer. It's just so interesting to see all these different lines of play come up.
And oh, by the way, it's, I think, the 4th turn of the game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're in the mid game and it's turn 3 or whatever.
It's not like we've been not like we've been playing a while here. Say that. Nelson going to cycle a Street Wraith. Going to bring himself even lower. All right, 2 more. 6, Static Caster.
All right.
How does that change things? Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't think it does change anything. He already had a Liliana in his hand if he wanted to get that Neonate out of the way.
Okay.
So, you know, playing the Static Caster and playing Liliana are very similar lines of play here.
Looks like he's going to go with the Static Caster. Merriam's going to activate this. Going to discard a Dakmor Salvage, Dredge Loam. Neonate, Loam, Golgari Thug will go to the graveyard. Loam will go to Ross's hand. Okay. So Static Caster actually looking really good now on this battlefield. It can take care of Thugs, it can take care of Narcomoebas, it can take care of a lot of different things.
Yep.
It can maybe take care of Blood Gas depending on what happens.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, very potentially Brad just goes to 4 here.
Yeah, with Surgical.
With Surgical. I mean, he wants to get that conflagrate anyway. And it turns the Death Shadow into a 2-turn clock.
Makes it into a 9-9. Very true. Very true. I think he's thinking surgical now.
Yep.
Yes, he is. Gonna fall down to 4. Conflagrate, you need to politely leave. Ross's hand right now, 3 lands and a life from the loam. Nelson gonna remove a couple copies of Conflagrate here. There's another one. Do a quick check here. Ross has the full 4 this weekend. Sometimes you only see this deck play 3, but maybe he sideboarded one out.
Yeah, if you're going to bring in some cards like the ley lines and some axes and things like that, you got to take something out of the deck.
All right.
You don't want it to be the dredgers.
2-turn clock, as you mentioned, so Ross is going to fall down from 18 to 9.
Yep.
So Brad can prevent lethal next turn.
Well, it's also funny the way the game developed. We talked about all these tricky lines of play. When's he going to want to do this? Now, later, in response to something, is Ross going to cast that card? And it turned out he just wanted to get himself down to 4 this turn. Got to play it, while Ross was tapped out, and shook out in a more simple way than we might have predicted.
Merriam's going to dredge a Golgari Thug. He needs it to be a pretty good one here. Amalgam, Faithless Looting, Bloodghast, Leyline.
Yeah, double Bloodghast there.
Only one. Only
no,
one.
I'm saying
if it was
double
Bloodghast, it's game over.
Yeah.
But now Ross gets to do a pretty decent amount of dredging because he has a Faithless Looting.
Mm-hmm.
So, let's go this way. Dredge 1 is a loam. 1 is a blood. That's it. 2 imps and a Bloodghast, and now he's going to dredge Stinkweed Imp, Narcomoeba Mountain, Narcomoeba, Copperline Gorge, Stomping Ground. And now Brad just says, you already see Brad thumbing his lands. Ross is going to discard a couple of lands. He's got to make sure he's got one left in his hand.
No mistakes.
Yeah. Get back Narcomoebas, play a land, get back Bloodghast. They're going to both have haste because Brad has let less than 10 life come across for exactly 4, and we're going to get ready to play game number 3 as Ross Merriam and Brad Nelson are all tied up here in round 2.
Yeah, and that's the power of the dredge deck. I think the first game was actually quite interesting and really close. The second game, interesting, very close at the end there. And both times, to me, Dredge did not have one of its premium draws.
I agree with that.
He had very little going on in the first couple of turns, super slow out of the gates. The first game, Brad got his big payoff card in Cathartic Reunion with a discard spell. And the Dredge game, the Dredge deck was still able to make those games super close.
Yeah. Ross able to stay in it and get the win that game. So he's shuffling up for game number 3. Brad might be going back to the drawing board. We will see. Nothing I think really changes though with the sideboarding, yeah?
No, both these decks are very established. There's no real surprises going on. I think they both knew what was going to happen post-sideboard.
Well, game number 3 about to be underway here in just a moment. Looks like they're shuffling pretty quickly. So first and foremost, let's talk about the StarCityGames.com YouTube page where you can go back and watch replays of a whole bunch of stuff, honestly. Like this tournament, like Split Second hosted by Jeremy Knoll, like the Versus Series with Brad, Ross, Todd Stevens, newest member, Todd Anderson, oldest member, and of course, Tom Ross. We've got the Commander Versus Series with Jeremy Knoll, Stephen Green, the American Dream, Justin Parnell, and Jonathan Suarez, who is playing in this invitational, so good luck to Mr. Suarez. Magic Online playtesting, best of the SCG Tour, and a whole bunch more. Subscribe today, youtube.com/StarCityGames. Become one of over 119,000 subscribers as these two players almost ready to take a look at their opening hands here. Perhaps Brad considering a little bit different sideboarding, but we turn our attention away from Brad and over to Ross, as he will be on the draw this game. Now, we saw Brad's numbers. They are sizable. Ross no slouch as well, the 28-year-old from Middletown, Connecticut, who now lives in Roanoke, Virginia, producing content here for Star City Games. So not too far for Ross this morning to go to the tournament. 18 open top 8s, 4 wins, one of which with Dredge in Syracuse last year. 2 invitational top 8s. Still looking for that first win, though. Big Jeopardy fan, as you probably know. He appeared on the show in July of last year. Eats eggs for breakfast nearly every morning, and he is a very large Utah Jazz fan because he bugs me about them all the time. Ross, bad news. Gordon Hayward, he's out of there. He's leaving. He's going to Bostonia.
Eggs almost every morning, huh?
I could do that.
Is that a big It's not a big deal. I don't know.
Some people have their routines. I like a little egg white, like egg white and spinach omelet this morning at our hotel.
Nice.
Yeah, wasn't bad.
I just don't know how. Is that a compelling storyline for our fans?
Some people are really into eggs, man.
Yeah, I mean, I tie my shoelaces almost every morning.
I don't wear shoes with shoelaces. So what do you think about that?
How about right now?
This doesn't count.
What's going on right now?
This doesn't count. These are dress shoes. It's not my fault. Copperline Gorge, Faithless Looting here from Merriam. He'll draw 2. He'll discard 2 here in just a moment. To note, Ross, no ley line this game, so Brad's graveyard is online.
Good to go.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, it looks like Ross has a much better hand as far as dredging goes.
One of those premium dredge draws, perhaps. Faithless Looting put a prized amalgam and a Golgari Thug into the graveyard. Nelson's going to cycle a Street Wraith. He'll draw a card. Now, Nelson does have that pesky Surgical Extraction again. He's going to play a Thoughtseize for now. Let's see what Ross is working with. Another copy of Faithless Looting. Another prized amalgam. A Life from the Loam, it looks like. Along with the Deckmore Salvage, a Blood Crypt, and an Arid Mesa.
Yeah, and this is the type of hand, if the opponent has no interaction, Ross is going to just end up with a massive graveyard real early in this game and just have so many resources to work with. You know, just free creatures coming in, the potential to get flashback big spells later in the game, the Life from Loam building up his hand.
Have access to basically everything.
Yeah, this is a hand that has it all, but like you said, Brad does have a Surgical Extraction, and we might see it fired off quite early in this game.
Yeah, he might be thinking Faithless Lootings this game. This will be a little bit interesting. 2 in the graveyard right now. Of course, Ross is going to have 4 in his deck total after sideboard, but Nelson with only 1 land. So we're going to head back over to Merriam. He's going to dredge a Golgari Thug. Conflagrate, Stinkweed Imp, 2 copies of Copperline Gorge here for Merriam. Now he'll sacrifice an Arid Mesa, going to fall down to 19, maybe a little bit lower than that as he's going to cast a Life from the Loam from his hand.
And this is the tough part about having Surgical Extraction as your hate card for graveyard strategies. Brad wants to get everything here. You know, those zombies, those are a problem. The Faithless Lootings, those are a problem. All of the dredge cards, those are a problem. The fireball sitting in the opponent's graveyard, that's a problem. He wants to get it all, and he has to pick and choose which one's the worst for him.
Now I want to do a Nile Spellbomb check. Does he have any of those this weekend? I don't think he does he?
He showed up with Surgical Extraction instead.
Okay. Those are the choices you make, though, because you can't cover everything in Modern.
Correct.
Which is actually some of the appeal to the format, is because if you could beat everything, then we have the best deck.
Yep.
And while Death Shadow is a very good deck, it doesn't cover everything. So here you mentioned that Brad would like to get every single card. I 100% agree with you. He would love to rip off a Nile Spellbomb here.
Yep.
Take care of the whole graveyard. Now he's got to really pick and choose with the Surgical Extraction he has in his hand, as he's at 11 life here.
Well, and that's what I said during our pregame show. One of the reasons I'm a fan of Dredge is because there are enough big players out there in Modern. There's enough other decks making a splash. You know, people have to show up ready for Grixis Death Shadow and the other Death Shadow variants. People have to show up with sideboard cards for the Collected Company counter decks. We just saw Affinity make a big breakout in Las Vegas. And Dredge has had some solid finishes, but not the spotlight finishes that really put a target on its back. So it's still flying under the radar, and people just don't have enough hate cards for the deck.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? If Ben Friedman wins that tournament and beats Brad Nelson in the finals, maybe the narrative changes.
A little bit.
Maybe the Rest in Pieces and the Nile Spellbombs and a whole bunch of graveyard hate shows up, but Brad won that tournament. And so it looks like Death Shadow's the best deck in the hands of a great player. And Ben Friedman's no slouch.
Yeah.
You know, he had a great tournament, and Dredge has been performing very, very well, but it does continue to fly under the radar a little bit, so we don't see a ton of graveyard hate, and Brad's sideboard is a perfect example of that.
Yeah.
Brad thinking Death Shadow here.
Yeah, he's in a tough spot with only 1 land.
He's just going to pass the turn back. Ross has got to be feeling pretty good about things right now. See what Merriam does want to dredge here. Looks like he's going to dredge Life from the Loam.
Yeah, I'm sure Ross is aware of the potential Surgical Extraction out of his opponent, but he just has so much going on that the Surgical is not going to unduly disrupt him this game.
Stubborn Denial going to take care of Faithless Looting. All right. Just regular mode. Now Nelson has picked up a land. So he thought about tapping out for Death Shadow this turn, that last turn, decided against it, kind of got paid off a little bit.
Yeah. Big payday there.
Nelson did pick up that second land, as I mentioned. It's a Bloodstained Mire. You see the life total at 11. Could go down to 8 at any moment, 6 if he wants to via Surgical Extraction. Also worth noting is that he has a Snapcaster Mage in hand. So that in combination, of course, with Surgical Extraction, that's 2 times.
That's like twice as many as one time.
That's correct. You're on the A game this morning.
Put that man in the booth.
Yeah. All right, here's Death Shadow.
But Brad has to be very careful. The conflagrate is obviously a big deal. And we saw basically a mini fireball when it was just 2 vampires that showed up with haste last game.
Yeah, those 2 Bloodghast with haste were good enough to get the job done.
You know, there's not a whole lot of decks that punish the Death Shadow deck for dealing itself that much damage.
I'd say Dredge is one.
Dredge is one of them.
Yeah. Stinkwinnip's going to Dredge 5. Among those cards, you saw Bloodghast. You also saw Golgari Thug. Second copy of Conflagrate as well. So Surgical Extraction may be looking a little bit better now. Merriam's got to be wary of a couple of cards at the moment. For one, we just saw a Stubborn Denial last turn, so you have to be worried about it again. Surgical Extraction, which Ross did see in the last game, he has to be wary of again. Here's an Arid Mesa. That's going to trigger the Bloodghast. Bloodghast is going to come back, which will trigger Amalgam so long as Ross remembers. Remember that Amalgam all the way down over there. Normally he pulls it to the side. I'd hate for him to forget.
I bet it ends up in play at the end of the turn.
We'll see.
If I was wagering man.
We'll see.
Which I'm not.
Yep.
You know that I'm not.
You played okay.
Very conservative.
Faithless Looting. Is it clear for takeoff? It is. Going to start by dredging a Thug. 2 Cathartic Reunions and a Bloodghast, the relevant stuff here. Now Ross has drawn a card for the second part of Faithless Looting. Of course, just draw 2 cards. He dredged 1, he drew 1. Now he's going to discard a couple of cards.
Yeah, it's just a little unlucky for Ross here. I mean, he kind of has a lot going on, but he hasn't hit a whole bunch of dredge cards yet.
Going to discard an Amalgam and a Thug. Now remember, he's got a Bloodghast in the graveyard, and he can sacrifice Arid Mesa. Assuming he has a land to search for, get a land. That'll trigger Bloodghast, bring that back, and then that'll trigger the Amalgams to come back.
Well, 1 Amalgam's already been triggered this turn.
As long as he remembered.
As long as you remember.
Yep.
And so the 1 will come back here.
And that'll trigger the other one.
And then the other one will see that one came back.
Correct.
But it's all a moot point now.
Yep, because Brad's got the Surgical Extraction.
So he decided to stop the creatures instead of the Conflagrates.
Okay. Now remember, Brad's got Snap
in
his hand, so he can take care of Conflagrate if he'd like to.
Yeah, he can run it back, which he probably is pretty interested in doing.
You see Ross's hand here. It's kind of a mismatch of garbage, honestly. There's a Stinkweed, like a Stinkweed Imp, a couple of lands from Loaming. You know, he's able to do a lot on his turns, even though it doesn't look like much. He's able to dredge a lot. He's able to get some creatures on the battlefield, or at least try. And then, of course, he's able to build towards a big Conflagrate as well.
Yes.
Which is, he's kind of doing it all at once.
Yep.
Even though it doesn't feel that way.
Well, and depending how the game shakes out, a lot of games we see him just get value out of these cards. He'll just cast a Stinkweed Imp and just try to brick wall one of his opponent's creatures that way. We saw the Thug just be so critical previously, just chumping and putting creatures on top.
Yeah, but even though he didn't win game 1, it basically did everything in game 1. It basically got his engine online, bought him plenty of time, but he just wasn't able to cross the finish line.
And with how hamstrung Brad has been on mana this game, he's done a very good job of kind of mitigating the level of damage that he could take. The Stubborn Denial to me was just crucial at that point in the game for him to just not fall so far behind.
Yeah.
Then we see the Surgical Extraction just ripping away all of these free bodies that he would have to worry about. So he's still squarely in this game.
This is a winnable game, for sure. Even though Ross has got a lot of life to work with, and Brad, by design, does not. 9's a lot for this deck.
Yeah.
9's a lot. Bloodstained Mire is going to make it 8, and then probably 6, but 9's a lot for right now.
Well, and yeah, the Snapcaster on the Surgical could be.
Let's call it 4.
Could be 4 if you
Let's
wanted it
call
to
it
be.
And Bloodghast, they have no problem dealing 4. We saw that in the last game. No problem dealing 4.
Well, and last game, Brad was very incentivized to end up at 4 life.
Agreed.
And
2-turn clock.
Yeah, this game he doesn't have the same incentives. So I doubt we'll see him be so cavalier with his life total.
All right, Bloodstained Mire, you're in the graveyard. Nelson's going to fall down to at least 8. Let's make it 6 via Blood Crypt.
Although I've been wrong before.
We'll be wrong again. It's part of being in the booth. That's why we're in here, not down there. It's easier up here. I like it up here. It's comfortable. We got like nice chairs this weekend.
Yeah, these are some sweet chairs.
Yeah.
They hand us a bottle of water whenever we want it.
Yeah, I got a big table. Life's pretty cozy up here. 7/7 Death Shadow right now. Thump.
Kaboom.
Snapcaster Mage. This is before damage, I imagine. Going after what I have to imagine is Conflagrate. Yep. So now Brad's going to go get those. He's going to fall down to 4. 13 minus 4 is 9. Blood Crypt is going to... Okay. That was weird. Ross said I'm going to sacrifice Arid Mesa, go get Blood Crypt, so I can get back my Blood Ghast.
Sure.
Okay. There's another Conflagrate.
And same thing, Brad needs to see no vampires here.
Yeah, that's true.
No vampires.
Yeah, there are ways for Ross to just win the game straight away right now. 9-4.
Well, and using the fetch land, Ross put himself on a 2-turn clock.
Mm-hmm. Golgari Thug, Leyline, Insolent Neonate ×2, and a life from the Loam. Ross with plenty of cards in hand could probably double spell this turn. In, Snapcaster Mage down. Brad down to 2. Bloodghast's going to come back. Ross down to 7. Let's play a Stinky. Let's play a Thug. 2 of those creatures can block. Does Brad have a way to get 2 creatures out of the way?
It's a slow peel.
It sure was. Picked up a copy of Surgical Extraction. Oh, it's a Kozilek's Return he would have had for the win, but he did not draw a land. And Ross Merriam is going to win this game and match over Brad Nelson. 2-1. Dredge going to just hang on against Grixis Death Shadow. It's going to put Ross Merriam up to 2-0, and Brad Nelson's going to fall down to 1-1.